He tossed my bags right onto the wet asphalt outside the terminal at Philadelphia International Airport and said, "You're on your own from here?" "No, I'm sorry. No, we need to talk. Not even a cliche, I don't love you anymore. Just, you're on your own." And then he drove off into the darkness, leaving me alone in 0-degree weather with no cash, a dead phone, and a plane ticket I never even got to hold. I stood there for maybe 5-10 minutes. The taxi drivers looked at me like I was crazy. A woman in a thin coat with 2 suitcases, just standing there, staring at the taillights disappearing into the night. Then one of the skycaps, an older guy in an orange vest, walked up and asked, "Need some help, ma'am?" I opened my mouth, but instead of words, all that came out was a choked sob. Without a word, he grabbed both bags and led me to a bench near the entrance. "Sit down, catch your breath," he said gently, and walked away. I never got his name. I didn't have time to say thank you. I couldn't do anything at all. I just sat there, wondering how 7 years of my life could end right here, by the sliding glass doors of the airport, under a flickering yellow light. But back then, I didn't know the most important part. I didn't know that in 7 days, everything would change. I didn't know that a hotel housekeeper, a woman I had only seen once in my life, would say 4 words that would literally bring David to his knees. And that this wouldn't be the end. It would be the beginning. Let me start from the beginning. David and I met in 2016 in the most mundane place possible. The Pen.DMV office on Arch Street in Center City. I had just moved to Philly from Allentown and was there to update my driver's license. He was sorting out some paperwork for his car. The line was moving at the speed of a frozen river. The digital ticket board had been stuck on number 47 for about 40 minutes, and everyone around us was quietly losing their minds. David was standing right in front of me, scrolling through his phone. He turned around and said, "Do you know if they have a coffee cart or anything around here? I haven't eaten all morning." There wasn't one. But 20 minutes later, we were standing by a cheesesteak spot on Broad Street, and he was telling me about his job. He was an industrial structural engineer, always traveling for work. He spoke easily, without bragging, and knew how to laugh at himself. Back then, I was working as a coordinator at a small travel agency. I had just moved to Philadelphia and was renting a room in South Philly with a girl named Kate from accounting. Life was chaotic. Money was tight. But there was a certain lightness to it all. It felt like everything was still ahead of us. David called me the next day, and then the day after that. Within a month, we were spending every weekend together. He was one of those men who made things easy, not because he lacked character. He had plenty of that, stubborn as a nail in a wall. But because around him, I never had to guess what he was thinking. I didn't have to overanalyze his silences or wait anxiously by the phone. He was direct. "Natalie, I don't like it when you're late. Natalie, you look gorgeous today." No games, no beating around the bush. I wasn't used to that. Before him, back in Allentown, I had been with a guy named Victor who communicated strictly through hints and passive-aggressive pouting. David's bluntness was almost intimidating at first. We got married in April 2018. It was a small wedding, about 30 people at a cozy bistro in Manayunk. My mom came down from Allentown and his parents flew in from Denver. His mother, Teresa, looked at me from our very first meeting as if I'd dragged mud into her house. But David told me then, "Don't worry about it. She's like that with everyone." So I ignored it. After the wedding, we moved into his apartment in Edgewater. It was a 2-bedroom on the 5th floor of an old brick walk-up. High ceilings, squeaking hardwood floors that I hated at first, but eventually grew to love. I did some minor renovations there. We repapered the kitchen and replaced the drafty windows. David worked, I worked. On Saturdays, we'd drive to his parents' cabin in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It was a modest place with a sauna, apple trees, and the constant comforting smell of wood smoke and damp earth. Teresa would immediately assign me chores. Peel the potatoes, set the table, and she never once said thank you. I learned not to expect it. 2 years after the wedding, I switched careers and left the travel industry. The sector was struggling anyway, and then COVID completely wiped it out. I got a job as an assistant manager at a boutique hotel downtown called the Silver Key. It was a 4-star, 40-room place that mostly hosted business travelers. I loved the job. I was good at it, knew how to de-escalate conflicts, and remembered our regulars by name. I knew who needed an extra blanket and who just wanted quiet. The general manager, Mr. Henderson, used to tell me I was the face of the hotel. I was making about $140,000 a year, plus quarterly bonuses. We started saving for a new car. He had sold his old Honda during the pandemic. We started talking about a mortgage, about having a baby, cautiously in passing, as if we were afraid to jinx it. I remember him lying next to me one night and saying, "Natalie, I'm just happy with you. No strings attached. Just happy." I laughed and said, "Me too." And it was the truth. Maybe that's why what happened next hit me so hard. When things are good, you don't look out for the blow. You let your guard down. You start believing that this is your place, your people, your life. And you don't notice when things quietly, millimetre by millimetre, begin to shift. The first time I noticed something off was in October 2022. We were planning a weekend trip to Boston just because. I've been wanting to show David the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Really take our time, not rush through it. I booked a hotel on Boylston Street and bought Amtrak Attila tickets. On Friday evening, he came home much later than usual. He tossed his jacket onto a chair instead of hanging it up like he always did and said he was too tired and they asked if we could reschedule. "David, I've already paid for everything," I said. "So what? Money isn't the issue." But it wasn't about the money. I had planned this. I had looked forward to it. He looked at me with a strange expression. Not angry, not annoyed. More like he was looking right through me. "Fine, let's go," he said, and walked into the bathroom. I stood in the kitchen, wondering what that was about. He's just tired, I told myself. Work, stress, the end of the week. I convinced myself of that pretty quickly. We went to Boston, and everything seemed fine. The museum, the harbour walk, a nice dinner at a bistro in the Back Bay. But there was something different about him. He kept replying to texts at the dinner table, something he had never done before. Once, he stepped outside to take a call and didn't come back for 20 minutes, red-faced from the cold and visibly tense. I asked, "Is everything okay?" He just said, "Just work." I nodded. That night, as he slept, I lay awake in the dark hotel room, listening to the muffled sound of traffic outside. Something inside me was quietly tightening. A tiny, barely audible alarm. I told myself, "It's nothing, just stress. You're imagining things." But the alarm didn't stop. It just grew quieter, waiting for its time. The next few weeks passed like a blur. I went through the motions, breathing, talking, answering questions, but inside there was only a numb, heavy emptiness. That alarm from the Boston trip hadn't gone away. It settled right under my ribs, dull and aching like a toothache before you finally see a dentist. David started staying late at the office more and more. First until 9 p.m, then until 11. I didn't make a scene. Not because I was weak or afraid, but because he always had a perfectly logical explanation. Closing out the quarter, delivering a project, pressure from upper management, it all sounded reasonable. It fit the picture of a man carrying a heavy workload. I would warm up his dinner, leave it on the stove, and go to bed. Sometimes he ate it, sometimes he didn't. In November, I noticed he stopped leaving his phone out when I was around. He used to just toss it on the table face up without a second thought. Now, it was either in his pocket or face down. A small detail, maybe. But like I said, I noticed details. It's my job. A hotel manager sees everything. The way a guest nervously taps their finger on the desk. The way they avert their eyes when given a name for a reservation. The body doesn't know how to lie. It always gives you away. In early December, David told me he had to fly out for a business trip. Denver, 3 days, meeting with subcontractors. I asked, "Will you drop by to see your parents while you're there?" He hesitated for a split second, hardly a heartbeat, before answering, "If I have time." I nodded. Later, after he left for work, I took his jacket out of the closet to iron it. In the pocket was a crumpled receipt for a dinner for 2 at Barclay Prime from the previous Friday. On Friday, he had told me he was at a corporate dinner with clients. I put the receipt back, ironed the jacket, hung it up, and told myself, maybe it really was a client dinner at Barclay Prime. Just the 2 of them. That happens. But I already knew I was lying to myself. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. The Denver trip went by as usual. He called every evening, his voice steady. On the 3rd day, I couldn't help myself and called Teresa. I mentioned that David was in Denver and asked if he was going to visit. She paused for a second and said, "No, he didn't mention anything." Then she added in her usual condescending tone, as if doing me a favour, "But he's a grown man, Natalie, not a child," and hung up. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand, staring out the window at the snow. He was in Denver, and he didn't even visit his parents. A 3-day trip, and he couldn't make time. He came back with a gift, a nice French perfume I loved. I thanked him, and we had dinner. I didn't ask, and he didn't offer. We slept in the same bed, but there was a vast, invisible chasm between us that had never been there before. I got through December on autopilot. I kept up appearances at work. Smile. "Good afternoon. Your room is ready. Of course, we'll take care of that right away." Mr. Henderson stopped by my desk one day and asked, "Natalie, are you okay?" I answered, "Just a bit tired, end of the year rush." He nodded and didn't pry. He was a smart man. We spent New Year's Eve at his friend Greg's cabin in the Poconos. It was loud, the champagne flowed, and the Christmas tree lights blinked merrily. At midnight, David kissed me. A real kiss, just like before. I thought, maybe I made it all up. Maybe it's just stress, exhaustion, paranoia. Maybe we just need to talk. In January, I decided to have that talk. I chose a Friday evening, made a nice dinner, nothing fancy, but made with care. Garlic shrimp pasta, which he loved, and opened a bottle of wine. When he came home around 9:30, delayed by a quarterly report, he sat down, ate, and praised the food. I waited until he put down his fork and said, "David, we need to talk." He looked up at me. Something in his eyes shifted, barely visible like a passing shadow. About what? About us. I feel like something is going on. You've changed. I don't know if it's work or something else, but I feel like we're drifting, and I don't know where we're heading. He was quiet for a moment, took his glass and took a sip. "Natalie, I'm exhausted. That's the truth. It's been a tough year. Don't invent problems where there are none. I'm not inventing anything. I'm just asking. We're fine. Everything's fine. Are you sure, David?" He said my name with that tone I absolutely despised. Weary, slightly patronising, as if I were a child keeping him awake. "I'm tired after work. I just want to sit in quiet. Can we just sit in quiet?" I didn't answer. I cleared the plates, washed the dishes, and went to bed. The conversation was over. February brought another business trip, this time to San Francisco for 5 days. He left on Sunday. On Wednesday evening, while I was home alone watching a show, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. The voice on the other end was female, young and tense. "Is this Natalie, David's wife?" I felt everything inside me tighten hard as a fist. "Yes." "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "My name is Vicky. David and we need to talk. He's not in San Francisco alone." I don't remember what I said. I think I just said, "Okay." It sounds absurd, but that was the only word that came out. I put the phone on the table, stood up, and went to the window. Outside, winter in Philadelphia was glowing with streetlights through the falling snow. A bus pulled up at the corner. People stepped off and dispersed along the sidewalk. Life was going on completely as normal, while my own was shattering into a million pieces. In 40 minutes, Vicky told me what David had been hiding for 8 months. Her name was Vicky Lawrence. She was 28 and worked in the finance department of his company. They met at a corporate event in May. David had told her that he and his wife had checked out of the marriage long ago and were only living together because of the apartment, that a divorce was just a matter of months, and he just didn't want to rush things. She called me because she realized he had no intention of actually getting a divorce. She had found recent photos of us on his phone from the New Year's Eve party at Greg's. We were hugging, laughing. That didn't look like two people who had checked out of their marriage, she said. There was no anger in her voice, only a profound sense of confusion. I suppose we had both been fooled. By the time David returned from San Francisco, I already knew everything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited for him in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea, watching him take off his jacket in the hallway. "Vicky called me," I said. He froze, his back to me. 2 seconds, 3. Then he slowly turned around. "Natalie, don't." I held up my hand. "Just tell me one thing. Were you ever actually going to tell me?" He sat down at the table across from me, rested his hands on the surface, and stared at them. I didn't know how. For 8 months, I didn't know. I thought it would just work itself out. I repeated those words, tasting them. Work itself out. Right. I stood up, poured the tea into the sink, set the cup down, and walked out of the kitchen. He remained sitting there. That night, I lay on the edge of the bed and thought that I probably should have screamed, cried, thrown plates like they do in the movies. But all I had inside was that numb, heavy emptiness I'd been carrying since October. Only now, it occupied the entire space. The next 3 weeks were a special kind of hell. We lived in the same apartment, but like complete strangers. He slept on the living room couch, his suggestion. I didn't object. In the mornings, we'd cross paths in the kitchen and talk about basic household things. We're out of sugar. The electric bill needs to be paid. The HOA sent a notice. Once he said we needed to talk about our situation. I replied, "When I'm ready." He didn't push. I called my mom in Allentown but didn't tell her everything, just that we were going through a rough patch. My mom said, "Natalie, every marriage goes through this. The important thing is family." I thanked her and hung up. I texted Kate, the friend I used to share a room with in South Philly. "Kate, things are really bad." She replied 2 hours later, "Oh no, what happened? Call me." I didn't call. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud yet. I kept my composure at work. It was the only place where I still felt like myself. Natalie, the manager, the face of the hotel, the person who had everything under control. I welcomed guests, solved problems, remembered that Mr. Peterson in room 208 always requested flat water and an extra pillow. That was what kept me anchored. And then March came, And David said we needed to go to Boston. Not for a vacation, not to make up. He framed it differently. There's some business there. And you need to be there too. I asked what kind of business. He said he'd explain when we got there. There was something different in his tone. Not the guilty quiet of the past few weeks, but something firm, decided, as if he had made a final choice and was now simply executing a plan. I agreed. I don't even know why. Maybe because a part of me was still holding onto hope. Or maybe because I just didn't have the strength to fight anymore. We bought Amtrak tickets. I took 2 days off work and packed my bag. On the train, he barely spoke, just stared out the window at the passing winter landscape. I held a book, not reading, just staring at the same page. As it grew dark outside, we pulled into Boston. The hotel was on Huntington Avenue. Not the one we had stayed at a year ago. A different, simpler place. I didn't ask why. We checked in and had dinner in the restaurant downstairs, mostly in silence. He drank 2 glasses of wine. I had one. Then he said, "Natalie, tomorrow morning we need to have a serious talk." I said, "Okay." And we went to bed. In the morning, he got up before me. When I came out of the bathroom, he was already dressed, not in loungewear, but in his street clothes, jacket on. His bag was packed and standing by the door. "David, where are you going?" He looked at me. In his eyes, there was no guilt, no anger, no pain. There was something far worse. The cold calm of a person who has made up his mind and has been living with that decision for a long time. "Natalie, I can't do this anymore. We need a divorce. I only booked the room for you. Your things are here. The return ticket is paid for. There's an Amtrak back tomorrow morning." He paused. "Leave the apartment keys when you get back. I've made arrangements. I'll stay with Greg for now." It took me a second to realize he was leaving right now. That this 18-second exchange by the hotel room door was the serious talk he had promised. "Wait," I said. You brought me all the way to Boston just to tell me this? Why here?" He shrugged, barely a movement. I didn't want a scene at home. He picked up his bag and opened the door. I stared at him, unable to move. Not from grief or shock, but from a total, deafening bewilderment at how a man I'd lived with for 7 years could just shrug like that. The door closed. I was left alone in the room on Huntington Avenue. Outside, a light, biting, angry Boston snow was falling. I sat on the edge of the bed, thinking I should do something. Call someone, go out, eat, anything. But I just sat there. Then there was a soft, professional knock on the door. The door opened slightly, and the housekeeper looked in. She was a woman in her late 50s, sturdy, with a kind, round face, wearing a Navy hotel uniform. Her name tag read Lucy. "Oh, excuse me," she said. "Can I come in to tidy up?" "Yes," I said automatically. Then I realized I was sitting in the middle of the room with a completely blank expression, and tears were streaming down my face. I hadn't even noticed when I started crying. Lucy walked in, left her cart by the door, and looked at me. Not with pity, but with a calm, understanding attention. The look of someone who had seen it all. "Are you all right, sweetie?" "No," I said. "I'm fine." She stood quiet for a second, then said softly, "Don't go anywhere just yet. I'll bring some tea. I have some real loose leaf with me. Not those paper bags." I wanted to refuse, but for some reason, I couldn't. Lucy left and returned 3 minutes later with a thermos and 2 paper cups. She poured, placed a cup in front of me and said, "Drink up. Then you can tell me about it if you want." I hadn't planned on telling her anything, but there was something about this woman. The simple way she sat beside me on the edge of the armchair, not rushing, not checking her watch. That broke the final dam inside me. And I told her. Everything. From the DMV line in Centre City to this very morning, the bag by the door, and the look in his eyes that held absolutely nothing. Lucy listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she paused for a second and said, "He was here last night. I was cleaning room 214 next door. There was a young woman in there. They were having dinner together. I saw them through the open door. He was ordering champagne." I felt a chill run down my neck. "Are you sure?" "I've been working here for 11 years, she said calmly. "I remember faces. Your husband checked into 214 on Friday night, a day before you arrived. There it was. That was why he chose this hotel. Not because it was simpler, but because he already had a room booked here, where Vicky was already waiting. He hadn't brought me here for a talk. He had brought me here to discard me in a way that was convenient for him, while she waited in the next room." I stood up. My hands weren't shaking. It was strange, because everything inside me was on fire. "Lucy," I said, "could you confirm that?" "Officially. The check-in date, the room number." She looked at me intently. "It's in the reservation system. I can tell the manager what I saw." I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Those 4 words were exactly what I meant. A housekeeper in a navy uniform was about to bring David's entire carefully constructed plan crashing down. I returned to Philadelphia the next morning on the Amtrak, just as he said. But I was a completely different person. On the train, I called Kate, the friend I used to rent a room with. This time, I didn't text, I called. She picked up immediately. "Kate, I need a good divorce attorney, right now." She didn't ask unnecessary questions. "I know someone." "Write down her number." The lawyer's name was Olivia Vance. She was about 45, worked out of a small office near Rittenhouse Square, and spoke quickly and to the point. I went to see her the day after I got back, carrying a folder containing everything I had managed to gather. Bank statements for our joint savings account, a photo of the Barclay Prime receipt, and screenshots I had taken back in November from his phone when he left it on the table while sleeping. The texts weren't complete, but there was more than enough. Olivia reviewed everything without a change in expression. "Who owns the Edgewater apartment?" "It's his." "Bought before the marriage?" "Who paid for the renovations?" "Partially me. The windows were definitely mine. I paid with my card. The kitchen we split." "Do you have the receipts?" "Yes." "Good." She made a note. "What about joint assets, savings, cars?" "He sold the car during the pandemic. The money went into our general budget. We have a joint savings account. Well, we both contributed. It had about $80,000 the last time I checked." Olivia nodded and said exactly what I wanted to hear. "We have plenty to work with." While I was sorting out the paperwork, something else happened. David was staying with Greg. I knew that. But 3 days after I got back, Teresa called me. I wasn't expecting her call and answered almost automatically. "Natalie," she said in her usual dry, crisp tone. "David told me everything." "Okay," I replied. "I want to make sure you understand. The Edgewater apartment stays in our family. His father and I helped with the down payment. Even if it was before your wedding, don't you dare try to claim it." I was quiet for a second, then said, "Teresa, I don't want the apartment. I want half of our joint marital assets, which is my legal right. If you have any questions, you can contact my lawyer." And I gave her Olivia's number. The pause on the line was long. "You've changed," my mother-in-law finally said. Not as a compliment, but as an accusation. Yes, I agreed. I have. We filed for divorce 3 weeks later. David apparently expected everything to go quietly, that I'd sign whatever was put in front of me and disappear. He even texted me a draft of a settlement agreement, probably drawn up by some lawyer friend of his. Under its terms, I would waive any claim to the joint savings account in exchange for no mutual claims, meaning not a single penny. I forwarded it to Olivia. She replied with one word: hilarious. At the first court hearing, David showed up with an attorney, a young guy in a sharp suit who spoke loudly and confidently. David sat next to him, barely looking in my direction. I looked at him and thought, this is the man whose dinner I warmed up for 7 years, whose shirts I ironed, next to whom I woke up every morning. And now, he was sitting 10 feet away, pretending we were strangers. His attorney argued that the joint savings account had been funded primarily by his client's earnings, making an equal split unfair. Olivia requested the bank statements. The statements showed that over the last 2 years, I had deposited over $30,000 into the account, about a third of the total. The attorney began arguing about the disproportionate contribution. That was when Olivia stood up and said, Your Honour, we have reason to believe the defendant intentionally concealed his extramarital relationship from the plaintiff, which resulted in a delay of divorce proceedings and, consequently, the continuation of a shared household. Furthermore, we have witness testimony confirming that the defendant cohabited with a third party during the marriage, including booking a room for 2 at a hotel in Boston at the exact same time the plaintiff was present in that very hotel. The courtroom went silent. David raised his head. For the first time during the entire hearing, he looked at me. Truly looked. In his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. Not guilt, not remorse. Fear. He didn't know about Lucy. He didn't know that a housekeeper in a navy uniform with a name tag on her pocket had remembered his face. Is the witness prepared to testify? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honour, Olivia said. Lucy Patterson, an employee of the Commonwealth Inn in Boston with 11 years of service. Lucy travelled from Boston for the second hearing. She walked into the courtroom in her everyday coat with a shoulder bag, sitting on the witness stand with the same quiet composure she had shown when sitting on the edge of the armchair in that hotel room. She told the court everything. The date David checked into room 214, the description of the woman, the champagne ordered the night before he walked out on me with his bags. David's lawyer tried to rattle her, asking if she might be mistaken about the dates, if she was confusing guests. Lucy looked at him and said, Young man, I've been changing sheets at that hotel for 11 years. I remember everyone who leaves a mess, and everyone who says thank you. This gentleman never even grunted a hello to me. Those are the ones I remember. Someone in the courtroom let out a quiet chuckle. David sat with his head bowed. That was when I saw it. Literally. He slouched, his shoulders slumped, and something inside him just broke and collapsed. Not theatrically, not for the court. Just a man who had been caught, who knew it, and knew everyone else in the room knew it too. The court ordered an equal split of the joint savings, $40,000 for me, plus compensation for the renovations. The receipts for the windows and kitchen I'd kept totaled another $8,500. All in all, nearly $50,000. Not a massive fortune, but it was justice. David didn't appeal. After court, I walked outside. It was April, unexpectedly warm, almost like summer. I stopped on the steps and just stood there, breathing. Olivia walked out behind me, shook my hand and said, You held up beautifully. I thanked her, and she left. I bought Lucy a box of nice chocolates and wired her $5,500 a month. You've earned this, Natalie, he said. I didn't argue. I didn't have to rent a room in South Philly again. Kate offered to let me stay with her until I found my own place. I lived with her for 2 months. We drank tea in the evenings, watched shows, and sometimes she'd bring home wine. And we'd talk until midnight about her life, mine, and how strangely everything is put together. In June, I rented a cozy 1-bedroom in Fairmount. It's small, bright, with a window overlooking a quiet courtyard. No squeaking hardwood floors, no other people's apple trees, no smell of someone else's cabin. I told my mom everything after the trial when she came to visit in May. She sat in my new kitchen listening in silence. Then she said, "I should have come sooner." "Mom, I didn't ask," I replied. She stayed for a week. We walked around Fairmount Park, ate ice cream, and talked about nothing. It was wonderful. I don't know much about David. Kate occasionally hears things through mutual friends. He moved out of Greg's place and rented an apartment somewhere in North Philly. Things with Vicky apparently didn't work out either, though that's no longer my story. Teresa hasn't called me since. I don't miss her. Sometimes I think about that older skycap in the orange vest at the airport. The one who silently took my bags and led me to the bench. I never learned his name. Never got to say thank you. But I remember that on the coldest night of my life, when everything fell apart, the very first person to reach out a hand was a complete stranger. Then Lucy, with her thermos and her words, "I'm not afraid." Then Kate, who didn't pry. Then Olivia, who said, "We have plenty to work with." None of them had to. They just did. For 7 years, I was building something I thought was my place. As it turned out, it was someone else's place where I was merely allowed to live as long as it was convenient. I found my own place later. It's smaller, quieter, and the only thing that squeaks is the window pane in the wind. But it's mine. And you know what the strangest thing is? I'm grateful for that freezing morning in Boston. Not to David, definitely not to him, but to that morning, yes. Because sometimes a door has to slam right in your face for you to finally realize you've been standing at the wrong door. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We would love to know what you think.